Hello readers, I'm Amy and today I'm going to walk you through creating an addition to my bookshelf. I feel like I'm shooting a lot of footage in my office lately, but for the last couple of videos, I'm watching footage and kind of doing commentary on it, so it is what it is. But anyways, I decided my library is getting way too small. We're not gonna address that maybe my collection is getting too big. The problem is not that I have too many books, the problem is that I don't have enough shelves, okay? Okay. Anyways, I have 6 crates from Michael's, like the $10 crates that have been sitting in my basement. I didn't use all 6, I only used 4 because I wanted to make another one of those 4 square things. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with my last 2 shelves yet, if I'm gonna pick up 2 more eventually and make another edition, or if I'll maybe take care of the 2 that I have and prop them up somewhere. I haven't made any decisions on that. And now that I have the edition put into my library, it'll be a while until I need to worry about it again. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and walk you through the process. So I started with an actual painting plastic this time, which I haven't done before. I should have, but previously I've torn apart and laid down garbage bags. Not the best way to do things, but now I have a proper bit of painting plastic. I realized only afterwards I didn't actually need to lay this down when I did, because I was just doing sanding, but it's already done. It is what it is. My sander, I believe I got for $25. It's a Black & Decker. It is my most used tool personally. It's gotten me through years of doing these bookshelves and it hasn't failed me yet. You can see there's holes on the bottom of it, and that is where the debris, like the extra wood and stuff that's getting sanded off, goes into those holes and gets put into this little kind of hard plastic pouch that goes on the back. But the actual sandpaper, since it's made to be able to fit a couple different sizes of sanders or be used in different ways, the sanding papers don't have holes in it. So the Black & Decker comes with this little hole punch thing that you set it into. Whenever I did the research for this beforehand, I did look up how to do sanding, what kind of numbers to use, because sandpaper has different numbers which correlate to how coarse it is. So you want to work from coarse to fine. So you're going to work with a lower number to a higher number. My first bit of sanding was done with 80 sandpaper, my second sanding was done with 120, and my third sanding was done with 220. The whole thing probably took me about an hour and a half to do all 4 shelves. And you'll see this more whenever I start the staining, but where the slats are cut, you of course have that rough edge where it was cut against the grain. Now, whenever I do the staining for that, I had to kind of take my brush and just press the bristles head down right into there to get into all the little holes and stuff, because it's really hard to stain. It's a really rough surface. There's lots of little divots and things. But on the flat, smooth surface that isn't cut against the grain, like on the end of the bookshelves and stuff, that's really smooth. It's sanded down really fine, so the stain just soaks right in there. So you can see the difference that something like sanding would do, or the difference between the smooth and rough edges whenever it comes to sanding. One of these bookshelves was really dirty because it was hanging out in the shed for the last 2 years. So cleaned it up as best I could, sanded off a lot of the debris. It's not a big deal to me because I didn't keep these shelves as their natural color. When I was done sanding, I went ahead and took an old towel. I have 2 old towels that I use for this project specifically. I use one of them to brush off the debris from sanding so it's not super dusty or anything whenever I stain it, and the other towel I use to take off the staining, which you'll see later. This is my stain. I believe it's a dark walnut, if I remember correctly. This can it's gotta be 6 years old at this point. I think I might have started with a smaller can at one point, but I went ahead and got this bigger can. It has lasted me through all of my bookshelves. It's lasted through freezing winters and hot summers sitting in the shed, and it's still good and it still works. So awesome. I will say the pre-treater, which I didn't use a pre-treatment this time. I prefer to use pre-treater because it does make the color brighter. I just never picked any up this time. That stuff will not last through a cold winter. So if you leave it in a shed outside for the winter, you're not going to be able to use it. It gets all kind of like cloudy and thick. So would recommend just that you really only need a small can for something like this, since it's not going to last for that long. When it comes to painting on the stain, I do try to go with the grain. I wasn't super like precise in my work for this. You can see how it's dripping down the sides. There's parts in between the slats where it drips onto the inside. It will stain like that. It'll stain with splotches and stuff if you don't fix it, but it's not something that I'm super concerned about. It's not a detail that a lot of people are going to notice, particularly with how stuffed my shelves are. So that's just up to you when you're making the shelves. Do you want to clean up the splotches? Do you not? To me, it's not a big deal. Also, being as dark of a stain as it is, again, it's just not going to be that noticeable. And this time in making my bookshelves, unlike previous times, I didn't totally kill my knees because I found Chris's construction knee pads in the basement. These things were amazing. The back of my knees hurt a little bit after a while from like the denim material scrunching and having the Velcro and everything, but worth it considering the knee pain that I avoided. So would recommend having that. Whenever you're done staining, you do want to let it sit for at least 8 hours. Now these sat in the garage overnight, so without the circulation of a lot of air, rubbing them off with this towel wasn't super successful the first time. This is my second old towel that I use. When the staining is done setting, you want to use a towel to really rub off the extra stain because there is going to be some leftovers that didn't quite soak in. But at this point, it was really just kind of holding on to the lint from the towel. So I did leave them out in the sun for a few more hours before I went back to work over them with the towel again to get that extra stain off. And then once they are ready, they're sanded, they're stained, they're ready to stack up. You want to stack these in a couple of different ways because you want to make sure that the two crates on the bottom are flat, lay as flat as possible. Whether you're going to be stacking them on another shelf or stacking them on the floor, you just don't want it to rock. Avoid that as much as possible. And then with the way they're stacked here, if you get up close, you can kind of see if you have the two edges next to each other, one of them might tilt a little more forward in one way, the other might poke out over the top. It just kind of depends on how the crates were originally put together. That's just something that happens whenever you've got these crates that are all either handmade or factory made, whatever. There's going to be some anomalies there. So just play around with changing the positions of each crate until you find something that works well and that's set correctly. Technically, I could get away with just using wood glue to attach these. Wood glue is really great for sticking crates together, but I do want to reinforce mine since I'm having so much stuff that I put on it. So after I put on the wood glue, even without extra stuff, when you put on the wood glue, you do want to use clamps to really just hold those crates together while they dry. But what I did and what I was able to do with taking off the clamps a little earlier than usual is that I was able to put in some screws. Some of my crates have nails. I will say when doing this, you want to go down through the slatted side. Do not drill or put the nail through the end piece because the end piece is thicker. Specifically with the nails and screws that I've used on my various bookshelves, they're pretty short because of the distance of the two pieces of wood that you're putting together. So the nail wasn't quite going to go through the end to get to the slat, so you want to go in through the slat side because it's thinner, and then it'll screw into the end and actually attach the pieces together. And I didn't go crazy with the screws on this. I put 2 in each side of the crate rather than putting in 4, 1 for each slat, just to kind of, I don't know, balance them out a little, offset them a little from each other. And once it was put together, I went ahead and left it out on the porch for about, I think, two or 3 days, because the stain smell is quite strong. And especially with having cats that have highly sensitive noses, I just left it outside for a couple of days to air out a little bit before I ended up putting it into my library. After adding in the addition and reorganizing my bookshelves a little bit, I'm pretty happy with the general setup. I'm not super satisfied at this point with how it's organized, but that's something that I'm just gonna have to kind of sit with and look at, browse my bookshelves during the next couple of weeks and just figure out what's really gonna work for me. My hope was that I could put all of the horror and sci-fi on one side of the room. Stephen King in particular, he just needed to move. He's outgrowing his old section. He needed to move into the new section. So I was hoping to fill in that side with horror and sci-fi. But with how my collection is growing, I really don't think that I would have room to do that. So right now, sci-fi and fantasy both are on the other side of the library. And this side is pretty much just horror at this point, with some dystopia, which can be horror depending on the book. But that is my bookshelf DIY. I can also go ahead and pin my original DIY video from several years back if you want to watch that as well. Please like, subscribe, be my friend on social media, and let me know down below how you organize your bookshelves. I do genre. A lot of them, particularly Stephen King, are grouped by author, and Stephen King, because we have so many of his books, is also organized by hardcover, paperback, mass paperback, and date of publication. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me. Bye guys.